Finally, we have interiors. Our goal here was to create a system which could define an interior, detect when a player enters and exits that space, and make changes to the ambience based on the interior type. There are two main types of buildings in Nightingale. The first is structures made from tile pieces. This includes structures built by the player, as well as some NPC buildings. As these tiles are interactive, the interior detection would have to update dynamically. Our audio programmers developed a system to detect these interiors and calculate things like how enclosed the structure is and what kind of reverb it uses. I'll cover reverb more later. The second type of building is handcrafted by the environment team and has a fixed layout. This includes ruins, temples, and caves. As they don't use tile pieces, we couldn't use the same detection here, so we had to hand-place volumes in these interiors. This also meant we had more control over the soundscape, and locations like caves have their own ambience. Different building types will have different mix changes to what we class as exterior ambience. This includes things like exterior wind, birds, insects, rain and thunder, etc. You could technically do this using obstruction and occlusion, but I wanted a more reliable way. As these exterior ambient sounds all share the same bus in Wise, they are controlled with a global RTPC when you enter a building. A thin wooden shack will bring the volume of the exterior ambience down slightly, but something like a temple made of thick stone walls will bring it down much more, or even completely in some cases. So how do we get this mixed state to transition smoothly? When entering a volume, the easiest and most common way to change the audio mix is to have an overlap event trigger a state change or global RTPC value. Even with smoothing applied, this method has its limitations. For example, if the player steps 1 mm into the volume and stops, you will still hear the full transition, even though the player has barely moved. Instead, I came up with a system that measures the player's distance to the entrance when inside, or as we called it, an acoustic opening. This meant that the ambience could transition in a more natural way as the player moves towards or away from the opening, regardless of their movement speed. As well as mix changes, our interiors also use reverb and early reflections. When a building is completed using tile pieces, we calculate the size of the room and the construction material, for example, wood or stone. This data is then used to pick from a suitable reverb send in Wise. For handmade buildings, we have the option to apply a reverb type manually. On top of this, we can apply other acoustic changes to reinforce the space. Using the RTPCs which are applied when entering an interior, we can switch out things like gun tails to play back a different sample. Here's that in action. Thank you for watching my videos on the ambience in Nightingale. I'm really pleased with how the ambient system turned out, mainly because of how systemic it is and how well it can adapt to changes in the environment, but also the level of detail and immersion I think we achieved. Hopefully the realms are a nice place to spend time in, whether you're building your estate, hunting animals, or exploring fey ruins and caves. Having said that, this was just how we chose to approach the task, with the time and resources we had, and it's by no means perfect. That's where I'd like to hear from you. What do you think could be improved, and what would you have done differently? Or do you have a question about something from these videos? Feel free to leave a comment, and I'd love to discuss this with you. Thank you.